Good afternoon to the folks that are joining us. We will get started in just a couple of minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's fun to see all the folks flowing in. We are going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. We're excited to welcome new participants, as well as those of you who were able to attend our conference in the past. We hope you got to be a part of our opening plenary session with Rinshawn Miller, but if you missed it, or if you wish you could see another breakout that's happening right now, no worries. The presentations are recorded and they'll be available on our conference website after the conference. So I'm Alice Egan, a clinical faculty member at the Sandra Rosenbaum School of Social Work. I'm very happy that you're here for this breakout presentation, Advocacy for Undocumented Immigrants, with presenters Cristhabel Martinez, Fabiola Hamdan, and Teresa Tellez-Giron. You'll have to listen to my voice for only a few minutes, and then I will turn it over to the folks that are the reason that we are all here. So first, and importantly, on behalf of the Planning Committee for the Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference, I ask that you join me in acknowledging that our University of Wisconsin-Madison campus, here on the shores of Lake Mendota, resides within the sacred homeland of the Ho-Chunk people, a place they call Dejop. As the reach of the university extends to the far corners of our state, we also respectfully recognize the inherent sovereignty of the 12 First Nations of Wisconsin. Whether you're watching this from the land of these 12 First Nations or you're more distant, we do encourage you to learn about the history of the land that you are on. As social workers, we have a duty to look critically at the role our profession has played in the attempted cultural genocide and destruction of Indigenous families, such as was the aim of boarding schools in this state and across this continent. This conference is rooted in critical reflection on our work as social workers. Our goal is to bring clarity about the past, but also to challenge and inspire us all to move into action in our work in communities once the conference is over. We hope this conference provides space for critical reflection, humility, and openness, which will allow us all to reflect, to hear and tell truths, and move toward action and transformation to support Indigenous rights, cultural equity, and racial equity. With acknowledgement and gratitude, we move forward today in our journey. So a few details before we get started. This presentation is being recorded, as are all of our presentations, and will be available on our conference website at a later date. We know many of you are curious about the CEUs you may have registered for, and you are all set. To access this presentation, you were required to provide your name and email, either because you were logged into Zoom or because you provided these upon entering. This allows us to verify attendance, and you will get CEUs for this presentation, which will be distributed by email in the coming weeks. Your cameras and microphones will remain muted, and the chat function is muted. However, we have a Q&A feature where you can submit questions for our presenters. Due to the large volume of attendees, we may not be able to get to all the questions, but we are watching the questions, and the presenters plan to leave plenty of time at the end of the presentation to get to as many questions as possible. So now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters, Cristhabel Martinez, Fabiola Hamdan, and Teresa Tellez-Giron. So a bit about them. Fabiola Hamdan is a bilingual, bicultural senior social worker with Dane County Department of Human Services. She's the first immigration affairs supervisor in the county. She has an MSSW from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. An immigrant from Bolivia, she is a strong advocate for the immigrant community. Fabiola provides outreach and resources to immigrants and refugee communities in Dane County. She has focused her life's work on being a leader and advocate for children and families in this community and beyond. Mrs. Hamdan was honored with numerous awards recognizing her for her excellent community service and outstanding work. These awards include Women of Distinction Award, sponsored by the YWCA, the National Association of Social Workers Distinguished Service Award, Village People Water Bearer Award, Madison College Community Councils of Color, YWCA Women of Distinction, Muriel Pipkins Award, Mentoring Positives, McDowell Alumni Achievement Award, United Way Volunteer Award, Distinguished Field Supervisor Award, and Si Se Puede 2017 from Madison 365, the most powerful Latinos in Wisconsin, and United Way 2020 Women United Philanthropy Award. Mrs. Hamdan has created and served on several committees and community initiatives over the past 25 years that have greatly benefited the community and vulnerable people. She's the perfect embodiment of a professional that works on 3 levels: individual, family, team, group, and system community. Cristhabel Martinez is an MSW student at the University of Wisconsin with a focus in policy and administration, and is the executive director of Dreamers of Wisconsin, an education-focused nonprofit organization supporting undocumented students to navigate and transition into higher education. Dreamers of Wisconsin supports students through advocacy, educational programming, and academic scholarships. Cristhabel is also the program assistant for the new Center for Dreamers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Most recently, Cristhabel was selected as one of Wisconsin's 36 most influential Latino leaders by Madison 365. Finally, Teresa Tellez-Giron is the first member of her family to come to the United States. After studying international relations at the Universidad Femenina in Mexico, she decided to come to the United States to learn English. She found love here in the United States and ended up staying and starting a family. She always had a passion for helping children and families, and one of her first jobs in the US was working at Centro Hispano, where she focused on assisting with the creation of programs to improve the lives of Latino families in Dane County. Now, for over 26 years, she has worked for Dane County Human Services as a social service specialist for youth justice, child protective services, and for joining forces for families. A year ago, she decided to be part of the Community Restorative Court program as a bilingual bicultural program leader. Ms. Tellez-Giron has been the co-chair of the Latino Children and Families Council in Madison for the past 20 years, and under her leadership, several annual community initiatives have been created. She is also one of the founders of the Dane County Latino Support Network, which is an organization serving to address the variety of needs for the Latinx community in Dane County. Ms. Tellez-Giron has served on over 20 boards and committees in the state of Wisconsin and received multiple awards. Wow, what company we are in. Thank you. Our warmest welcome today to the 3 of you, and we're looking forward to learning from you.
Alrighty, well, hi everybody and welcome. will be your moderator today, and I will be presenting the questions that you guys can enter into the chat and the Q&A, and we'll be taking questions towards the end. So today I have with me 2 very special guests. I'm super excited for them to present themselves in today's workshop. I don't know if either of you want to begin to present yourselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Teresa Tellez-Giron, and we were supposed to introduce ourselves, but a lot has been already said at the beginning of the presentation. I think that the main thing about myself is that since I was very young, I was committed to helping others, especially children, and that's where I have served most of my career. especially with the Latino community. That's very close to my heart, for obvious reasons. And so I've worked for Dane County Human Services in so many different capacities. And I'm happy to say that just before I retire, I'm now working with the Community Restorative Core Program. I'm very happy to be part of the program and be able to make some changes that were needed there.
So do I go next? Buenas tardes, everybody. Just wanted to give a big shout out to all of you that are part of this conference. It's Friday afternoon after a long week. All we wanted to do is relax, but I think we are committed to learn, share, and then be in this type of new reality. So my name is Fabiola Hamdan, and the introduction has been made. Very, very happy to be here. And just kind of share a little bit of my experience with the work we do with the Latinx community. So this is just, we're not experts. We're just gonna share what we do, how we do it, and more than happy to get any questions that you may have. Gracias.
And last but not least, I'm Cristhabel Martinez, and I'm a SW student here in the social work program at UW. And yeah, let's get started. So today we will be presenting, well, Fabiola and Teresa will be presenting on advocacy for the undocumented immigrants, what works and what needs more work. So before we get started, I'll share my screen. And we're just gonna kind of go over an overview. We just kind of did introductions, and now I can share the next slide. Pops up for me here. Okay, here, there we go. So an overview. So today, the program or presentation will be kind of broken up into two parts. So Teresa will be focusing and addressing and talking about barriers and challenges that impact and affect the Latino community. And Fabiola will be centering and focusing on what impacts the undocumented community within the Latinx community. And so that's just a little bit of the overview that will entail today's presentation. And then we'll kind of finish off with Q&A at the end. So we can get started. Teresa, I will actually hand it over to you now.
So we thought, that since this presentation is so close to our hearts because we're immigrant women, we will be starting the presentation with the story of how we got here. So my story is that I was studying international relations in Mexico and wasn't able to continue. So I needed to learn English. And so I applied for a scholarship and I got it. And I went to Atlanta, Georgia with a couple of other friends. And we thought, life would be great, easy, Once we got there, we obviously knew that we needed money, we needed to work. And I came on a student visa, so I wasn't able to work, supposedly. But my parents weren't able to continue to support me in school here. So I had to put myself in a situation where I needed to find a job as an undocumented woman. And so I started looking for jobs, and it was extremely difficult because I didn't know how to drive. I didn't know enough English, and I was undocumented. So I was very lucky to find a Mexican restaurant where I went to apply, and I told them that I really needed that job and I would work for whatever money they were willing to give me. And of course, they immediately hired me. And I was serving chips and salsa at the beginning of my career, as many immigrants probably do when they get here in the United States. And so because I went to school in Mexico, I was able to learn English. I was learning English in a fast pace. But working in that restaurant really set the grounds for who I was going to become in the United States, because I got my first experience as an immigrant woman, an undocumented woman. The first thing that everybody in the restaurant told me, if you hear the verdes, the greens, you need to run to the garbage can, because that means they're coming to pick us up. And so I never thought out that day would come, but it did. And so I was wearing an apron, and I, didn't know what to do other than to run and jump into the garbage can, the huge garbage can. Most of us were able to run and make it there. Some people were not able, and they were taken into detention. And so that was very traumatizing. And that's how I learned what life in the United States was for people who were undocumented. The next time I learned that, maybe I should bring my student visa with me, and just decided, you guys, what you need to do now is remove your apron, get your purse, sit down, and if, the verdes come, just show them don't tell them you're working here, just show them your passport. And that's what I was doing. And so I think that really said how I was going to become an advocate for that community. And so then years later, the process, many people say, why don't people, undocumented people, just apply for, to become citizens? And it's such a long process. And if you don't understand it, Fabi will talk to you more about this, but it was extremely difficult. And I knew how to write English. I started to learn how to speak English, and a lot of the process of filling applications. So years later, I became a temporary resident. Then I first got married. I met my ex-husband when I decided to move to another job in a hotel. And that's where I met my husband. And that's how I applied for my residency, by marrying a legal citizen. So I became a US citizen because I was able to complete my applications. And then when I became a legal resident, I decided I want to work with immigrants. I want to be an advocate, and I want to help children too. So I got my first job with Centro Hispano when I moved to Madison, and that's what I've been doing ever since. That really set the tone of, understanding these families. And when we will talk a little bit more with my presentation. And so why don't we start with the presentation? Let's talk a little bit about the general characteristics. Family center, most of us know, and if you know the a Latino person that you either friends with or families, that family is extremely important for us. Hispanic, well, let's start with the term. A lot of people ask me, do you want me to call you that you're Hispanic, Latino, or something else? And now we have the new trend, which is Latinx. Actually, both have different meanings. Often, it's a debate. It is generally accepted that Hispanic refers to people with Spanish-speaking background, and Latino, on the other hand, refers to those from the geographic region of Latin America. Just a little background there. A lot of you know that we are now the fastest growing population in the United States. We are 18.5% of the total population. And so, like I said, we're family centered. I think that faith, it's extremely important. We use the Virgin of Guadalupe for a lot of treatment and beliefs that we have about the Virgin. Respect is extremely important, in the family. And when we talk about family, we talk about a family where extended family is part of, like we have uncles, maybe grandparents living in the family. So for service providers, they need to understand that many times you need to involve the extended family, depending on how you want to connect with the, with the client or with the person you're working with. Many times you have to make sure that you give respect to the elder and then connect with the person you're working with. Language or distrust of institutions for basic reasons, for obvious reasons. And Fabi will talk a lot more about that when she talks about immigration. When you are already an undocumented person and you don't have a driver license and you don't have papers to work in the United States, I think you never know if you go to an organization and they're going to be calling immigration on you, and then you're going to be detained. And also another factors are the language. If the institution you're going to get services at does not have bilingual service providers, then it's harder to communicate and people don't trust that, Maintaining your language and your culture is extremely important, because otherwise we have families right now where their children don't speak Spanish and there is lack, they're not able to communicate, especially that the younger generation, and the older generation are not able to communicate because the older generation has not been able to learn English, and the youngest generation is starting to not want to speak their language. So parents are extremely, good about wanting their children, like myself. Both of my kids are bilingual. And I thank my mother because she was very good about making sure we continue to teach my kids not only the language, but also their culture, so that they will understand their identity. We have a strong work ethic, which means that, it was very hard to get a job for undocumented people. So that job means gold. They don't want to be late. They don't want to miss work. And in the next part of my presentation, I will tell you how that played a role during the pandemic. Next. Immigration status, Fabi will elaborate more on that. So language, we already talked about how important it is to maintain your language or even to become bilingual. High poverty rate, I think that that we are a community that lives in poverty, and that's why also the pandemic hit so hard on us. We have lack of appropriate resources, mental health. It's so hard to get our clients into counseling services. A lot of people are in waiting lists, and we struggle to try to get more bilingual counselors in the community to serve, the Latino community. So lack of bilingual, bicultural staff, it's obvious. Lack of Latinx health professionals. We're working really hard, the community, to try to make sure that more people graduate either as nurses, doctors, or any other places that are serving in the health profession. A lot of our families have a lack of knowledge about the US healthcare system, which brings a lot of distrust to go to clinics or to have care or to go to hospitals too. Transportation is a big issue because our elder community does not drive, and then their children who are able to drive many times don't have appropriate documentation. They don't have the driver license, which many years Fabi and I had worked really close with the Department of Transportation to try to get as many people as we could to pass exams and get their driver license. But then the law changed and we weren't able to get people to apply for driver license unless they were legal residents of the United States. Next. Barriers to positive incorporation, as we said, it's not easy to learn another language. A lot of people, when I am working with them, they say, why aren't they learning English? And sometimes I hate to turn it around, but I say, has it been easy for you to learn another language? Especially when the largest community, Latino community, comes from poverty in their own countries, and they haven't even graduated from elementary or high school. So when they don't have skills in their own language, it makes it very difficult to learn a second language. Poverty, we already talked about that, and discrimination and immigration. Fabi will cover more on that. Next. Okay, aspirations, everybody that comes to this country, they come to give a better life to their children. So that's what we hope, that they will understand, and we're very optimistic about their education. and we want them to graduate from the university, but there's so many barriers there. Next. We're very resilient, and we already talk about strong family, willingness to adapt, and we will talk about grassroots community organizations at the end of my presentation. So now let's talk about COVID-19 quickly. We were one of the communities that was largely impacted for obvious reasons. Everything that I talked to you about, people have to work, they weren't able to leave their job, they were afraid that they will not be hired if they left. And so a lot of people were exposed, and they're also frontline workers, So a lot of people were exposed to COVID, and they had and were forced to stay home, and many times not able to pay rent. So during this time is when the community really came together. And if we can go to the next slide. All of the disparities. The next one, please. Sorry. So during the pandemic, it really helped us to have a system in the Latino community that was already organized. The Latino Support Network was formed many, many years ago. I want to say 25 years ago. And it provides a lot of, we bring people monthly. We have monthly meetings where we bring people from different organizations to talk about what they're doing, and also to talk about how we can help you get more people who are bilingual to provide services. After the LASUB, we also formed the Latino Children and Families Council to support Centro Hispano, the Latino Education Council, the Latino Health Council, which is one of the largest organizations that provides and makes sure that we have, that we promoted a lot of health education in the community. The Latino Health Council worked together with the Latino Children and Families Council and the LCA, the Latino Consortium for Action, to get funding to serve the community during the pandemic. We were able to get a lot of money to help our community to pay for rent, gas, and other things that they needed. With the Latino Children and Families Council, we were able, and maybe I can talk during our panel discussion about an incident that occurred that took us to form the Latino Children and Families Council. And I think that my time is up, right, Fabi? We wanted to give enough time to you at the end for questions and for the panel.
Thank you, Teresa, and your time is never up. Cristhabel, can you put the? All right. So before we start, we decided that we're going to give you a little bit of our personal stories, like Teresa, myself, Cristhabel. I mean, Latinos, we come in all forms, shapes, and with different backgrounds and needs and all of that. So I'm going to try to be very briefly and tell you a little bit about my story. So I immigrated to this country 35 plus years ago. Just when I finished high school in La Paz, Bolivia, I had to come to this country. Why? Because my mother had a medical condition, that a tumor in her brain, not cancerous, but very growing in a rapidly, and then compromising a lot of nerves and things in her brain. So she really needed to come and then needed surgery. Somehow she found this friend, kind of faraway relative here in Madison, Wisconsin, who knew about the UW hospital and the research and all of that. She ends up coming to Madison briefly to see if there was any type of assistance or anything. And right away, the medical community here got very interested in seeing my mother's case. It was a unique case. Glomus jugular, that is a tumor that is in a very dangerous part of the brain and it was growing. So they decided that they are going to study and then, do a surgery eventually, but without any promises. So, kind of like the guinea pig, but that was the only solution that she could find. Then, my brother, sister, and my father decided to come here to this country and be with my mom, leaving everything behind. For us at that time, we want to be together. Lots of things happened in between. Finally, the surgery came, and then we basically lived in the hospital. All these years, I always talk about these angels in our lives. So we had angels that really kind of took care of us. At that time, there were not too many Latinos. We didn't know anybody. We didn't speak the language. So basically, we kind of had a room in the hotel where we stayed there and being with mom. Surgery was kind of successful. She needed some chemo and some other things for the tumor because they couldn't really extract the tumor. So they kind of separate the veins or whatever, but she needed to have irradiation, and that was a long process. And at this time, you have to remember, we don't have health insurance here. Lots of the doctors are giving, kind of their time, but, medication and hospital stays, all those bills were accumulating. So long story short, we decided that my two siblings and myself wanted to help, right? We're going to start working. So we ended up working, cleaning offices, and both of my brother and sister that were already in high school. We ended up working in fast food and Burger King. That was my first job, and really trying to make the best thing we can about our time here. After that, so switched to myself. Then I didn't know English. I took French when I was in high school, so I had no English at all with me. So, I needed to learn English and ended up going to Madison College because, that was the kind of someplace that I could go. Started taking English classes and working, and then, taking care of mom. So, just, that period was difficult also because I really didn't, it was hard, having to do a lot of these things and then start learning a new language. So then I decided that I needed to work, I have a better job, right? But to have a better job, you have to have a degree at least to get, somewhere that they can pay you decent. I ended up getting an associate degree as a computer operator from MATC, Madison College. And right away, before I even finished that associate degree, I had a job in an insurance company in a little town that I'm not going to name. But, right away, the minimum wage was $3.25. And then they offered me $7.50 an hour. That was like, oh my God, this is it. I'm rich, I'm gonna be doing this is great. End up working there, hated it. I worked a second shift and, I was miserable. And so talking about angels, one of my supervisors, observed that I was doing great, but I wasn't really happy, and asked me, what do you want to do? I said, I always wanted to go to the university, but I don't think I can afford that. Here, what am I going to do? And just with some encouragement, I applied to the UW-Madison, get accepted. And then I was like in the top of the world, right? I'm going to go to this university. First semester, I did so poorly that they put me in probation. I was going to be kicked out because I didn't know any of the anything about the university, and so anyways, who knows how with lots of help, angels in my life, I end up graduating and getting my master's degree from UW-Madison, and right away start working with Dane County Department of Human Services in different capacities, like in child protective services, neighborhood intervention, et cetera. Then I found community social work with Joining Forces for Families, or JFF. That was kind of my call. I really loved it. And I ended up working as a Joining Forces for Families community social worker for 18 years. loved the job. I think, that was something that really I learned from my parents. Both of my parents were educators. They were teachers back home, back in Bolivia. And I always remember them traveling to the little towns and learning with me, I'm the oldest. So learning what the community was all about and what are the needs and things like that. So they can, at least, although they were teaching, so they were like, really good. It was an inspiration. So anyways, then after JFF, then, the immigration affairs position opened, and I was very happy to have this type of job. I applied it, and then I was the first immigration affairs specialist. So with that, I wanted to just kind of transition to why this work is very important to me. As we know, previous administration, we had several attacks, negative attacks against the immigrant community, and with the previous president, the termination of DACA, the termination of TPS, the temporary protected status, the infamous wall that people, you guys know about that. Then, the ban in 7 Muslim countries, the family separation we witnessed, the threats of public charge, and the ICE raids. Next slide. So, I always wanted to remind people that all of that stuff, negative stuff, it's always staying with the undocumented and the immigrant community. It is in our heads. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I mentioned DACA. Many of you in the audience know what is DACA, but just for those of you that don't know, or just as a reminder, President Obama on 2012 did an executive order allowing certain people who came to the United States as children to apply and get the DACA status, right? But they had to follow several guidelines to request this. So if you're eligible and to have DACA, you are eligible. You have a work permit and you have a driver's license, but every 2 years you have to renew your your DACA, right? Then Trump administration end DACA, but the renewals would continue. Now this administration opened up DACA for new applicants for a very small period of time. And so many people were trying to apply, but then courts came and they closed that period of time. And right now I say that, we are, DACA is in a state of limbo because we're waiting for the courts to decide and then hopefully reopen DACA. Next slide. All right, and then many of us, as Teresa was saying, Latinx or are we Latinos or whatever, there are some terminology that we think that is important for us to remember. For example, who are immigrant or who is the non-immigrant and citizen and all of that. So quickly, I'm gonna go through those very key terms, okay? So next slide. Immigrants, who are we, right? The immigrants, foreign born and immigrant are always used interchangeably and refer to persons with no US citizenship at birth. So this population would include naturalized citizens, lawful permanent residents, refugee, asylees, persons on certain temporary visas, and the unauthorized. So those are the immigrants. Non-immigrants are students, students that come here with F1, F2 visa, temporary workers, visitors, like, I would like to come to Disney or whatever. And then, and others with temporary, where their visas only allow them to stay here a limited amount of time. So those are the non-immigrants. The next slide. Also, it is very, especially these days, especially us that are working with the immigrant community, to really learn if we don't know, but also it's easy for us to confuse these terms, right? So, for example, these days we're hearing a lot about refugees and asylees, right? So refugees, who are the refugees? A person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, and natural disaster. And the most important thing about refugees are that their status is determined abroad. So usually, around the country, when people are trying to get refugee status, they have to leave their country and wait in maybe some concentration camps or whatever for the United States to give them a pass to come and say, okay, now you can come. Here in Madison, we have U.S. Social Services. It's a resettlement agency that when refugees come to Dane County or Madison, they are the ones that help them to proceed with their immigration papers. Now, asylum seekers, asylees. Asylees are people or persons who are seeking or has been granted asylum. So basically, just think about, asylum seekers are coming and we're knocking on the door of the United States saying, hey, let me in, I am in danger of gangs or hunger or whatever in my home country, right? So then United States, and especially nowadays, you've been seeing a lot about the borders, right? People are waiting for United States to open the door so they can allow them to come in. So the big thing that I want to emphasize here is that when asylum seekers come inside the country without sponsor, usually they have 180 days to go to the immigration office, do the check-in and continue with the papers. So they're still undocumented. They come without work permit, and they're really coming to live with people that they know. We know here in Madison, housing is so expensive. You can imagine how vulnerable this population is. All right, so what do we have? And then basically these other key terms as far as residents, who are lawful permanent residents. So they are people who have this residency are people that are remaining in the United States as long as they can, as they want, but every 10 years they have to renew their residency. So as Teresa mentioned, you are a conditional residency for 3 years, then after that you can be a permanent resident, and then you can apply for citizenship. So I talk about visa holders, the undocumented immigrants, as you know, are people that are here without status, right? And then, or people that came with a visas, tourist visa, whatever, and they stay here, and then their visa expire and they become undocumented, okay? So basically, undocumented, they don't have documentation to be in this country. And the next one. So the path to citizenship is really hard. It's not like people say, get in line, get your number, and then you are gonna become a US citizen. So there are many, many stages and applications and things that you have to do before you can even become a US citizen. It took me about 9 years to become a US citizen, and it's not easy, it's costly. For example, once you have your green card for about 5 years, then you can start to apply for your citizenship. If your application is accepted, you have to pay $725. Then you have to be you have to pass the citizenship test and the interview in English. So we have a lot of people that are eligible right now to become a US citizen, but if they don't know English, it is hard for them to pass the test. So, so that's why we have about over 11 million undocumented people living in the United States. It's not easy. It takes time, money, and a lot of effort. All right. So the next slide, I talk a little bit about the ICE raids. As many of you can remember, on September 21st, 2019, we had a raid here in Wisconsin where 83 people were detained by ICE. 20 people were detained here from Dane County. And it was just 4 days of terror, panic. Kids were not going to school. We received phone calls from people that their staff were not there. Oh, my cook is not here. I don't know what's going on. And then, a complete terror. So I decided to do this raid without communicating with law enforcement here in Madison or in Wisconsin. And it was something that many of us working with the immigrant community really witnessed, and then it opened our eyes to really do or have something in place so we can help those immigrants. All right, the next slide. I think I'm going to run through fast, so we have time for us for questions. So how are undocumented immigrants impacted by their status? As you know, they don't have eligibility for federal financial aid programs or any federally funded programs, right? Right now, nobody can apply for Section 8. If you're undocumented, you are not going to be able to apply for W-2 and all of that. So it's very hard. No driver's license. Teresa talked about that. It's just like huge barrier for the undocumented people. We have undocumented people that have to take their kids to school or go to do grocery shopping, and in the wintertime, who goes walking, right? So we need to drive survival. So we're driving on the streets that all of us are driving, and people do not understand that if you don't give driver's license to people, we're still going to be here on the streets driving. And I think it's very important for us to advocate to have a driver's license for the undocumented people. If you don't have Social Security card, you don't have limited, you don't have access to many different benefits, or and even if you want to rent an apartment, they ask you for a Social Security number. You don't have a work authorization, then what you end up doing is having these jobs where nobody wants, the jobs that nobody wants. And, so we have a lot of issues with that, not eligible to, to pursue a career. For example, we have youth that are undocumented. Sometimes it's hard for us to tell, hey, keep studying, because the chances for you to go to a higher education is slim, right? So how are you going to, and then once you graduate, let's say with somehow, if you don't have documentation, it's going to be hard for you to find a job in your career. So the list is on and on and on. I always say that to be undocumented individual, it's just like to have a black, feeling like a criminal or just kind of living in the shadows and all of that, and many of you know. So I know we're running low on time. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Immigration Affairs Office. I want to give a big shout out to my amazing team, Yesenia Villalpando, we have Jose, we have Lily out there. Hopefully they're listening to this presentation. Our office was established in 2017 because we really needed to have services for the immigrant community, for people that are really having big gaps of services or trying to get an immigration attorney and all of that. So in a nutshell, you can go to the other slide. So our Immigration Affairs Office offer case management, advocacy outreach. We usually work with people that call us when they need, for example, when they have questions about how can I become a US citizen, or questions about, hey, my husband or my wife or my relative is detained by ICE, what do I do? That's when we connect with our attorneys, immigration attorneys we serve. We connect people with them while the attorneys are working with the person that's detained. us, because we are social workers, we work with the family, trying to give them a holistic approach by trying to help them with advocacy in the schools, basic needs, et cetera, et cetera. So our office also has a small passport assistance program for children. Many people that parents that are undocumented, they have their kids that are US born. We advocate for these kids to have passports. And if a family has 2, 3, 5 kids, the expense is huge. So we help with that. We do lots of training, presentations, and notary services as well. So I think I'm just going to skip the next slide, Cristhabel. Just go to collaboration. We cannot do our job without collaborating with many agencies. We have about 5 nonprofit agencies in Dane County that have immigration assistance services, like Centro Hispano, the Catholic Multicultural Center. We have the Immigration Law Center, and then Immigration Assistance Justice Center, U.S. Social Services. All these agencies, we collaborate and we have continuous contact because they have this immigration assistance program. So just to give you an example, if somebody is in need to become a U.S. citizen, we will connect them with one of these agencies so they can help with the process of application. But if this individual doesn't have money to pay for the application fees, then we can provide, we have wraparound funds, so we can pay for that application fee. We can pay for the medical exam. So we work very closely with these organizations. At the same time, we work, we have many private immigration attorneys in town that are wonderful, and we partner with them so we can assist the people. The next slide. So we have the immigration enforcement team. This team is a key team for us because in case ICE comes back again, we're not going to be surprised. We have this team that has representations from organizations such as Voces de la Frontera, Centro Hispano, MMSD. We have the MPD liaison that in case ICE come, the protocol is that they have to let law enforcement know that they are going to do a raid. So if that happens, the sheriff's office or MPD will connect with this group, and then we will disseminate the information and we will be helping people. And finally, I think we do a lot of community events. We do, always trying to educate our community about know your rights and do DACA clinics, etc. Advocacy is a huge part of our work because we not only advocate with our department, but we advocate for better services to our Latinx or to our immigrant community. And we have some resources that we listed there, but I know that we're running short on time, so I'm going to end here and pass it to you, Cristhabel.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Teresa and Fabi, for all of the information that you provided. This was very informative in terms of learning about the Latino community and also the different barriers and challenges that the undocumented community faces as a whole as well. So now we can move on to the Q&A portion of this presentation. And so just give me one quick second so I can look over some of the questions and see. So as we have seen, undocumentedness has impacts both children, families, and as well as Fabi, you kind of covered a little bit about how undocumentedness impacts, or being undocumented impacts students who want to pursue a higher education. So we actually just got one of the questions about, are international students considered undocumented or non-immigrants?
So with our international students, we have, they are into the category of the visas. They probably have the F1 visa. So they're, again, when we go to the undocumented, so we cannot call them like undocumented. They are here for a period of time with a visa. So they are I hate this word, but like legally here while they're studying. Now, if they do not go back home and overstay their visa, then that's when they become undocumented.
And then Jenny has a question about just looking for clarification. Can those who are undocumented get a Wisconsin driver's license? Or is my understanding correct that the law has changed? What do you recommend for undocumented people or persons who need to drive?
So, and exactly what I was saying, right? Undocumented people cannot get a driver's license, because to get a driver's license, you have to have a Social Security card. You're not going to get a Social Security card if you don't have your documentation. So it is really important for this person that asked the question to get united with Voces de la Frontera. Is our organization that is really upfront fighting for the driver's license. I cannot forget the AB 65 or whatever policy is there, that we all need to be advocating that we should have driver's license for our undocumented people. We used to have it about maybe 15 years ago. If I was undocumented, I will go to the Social Security office. They will give me a letter saying you are not eligible for Social Security. I will take that letter to the DMV, and DMV was able to give me a driver's license. I was able to pass the test and all of that, and that has been abolished. So now all undocumented people cannot get a driver's license.
And we actually have two questions regarding the term Latinx. So one of the questions is, what is your take on the term Latinx? Do you use it when talking to people that identify as Hispanic and or Latino, or do you recommend people just using Latinx?
I can elaborate on that. I think it's a very recent term and we're still kind of getting used to it. But I always say that when working with immigrant families, the first thing you need to do is ask the individual family, are you Hispanic? Are you Latino? Are you Latinx? Many times they ask me, so, are you a Latino, or what do you want me to say, Well, first of all, I'm Mexican. And yeah, I like to be called Hispanic. And so I think it's an individual thing, and we shouldn't assume that everybody, uses the same term or, refers to the, to the community in the same ways. And I think that, like I said, it's such a recent term that is more kind of being used at the university and incorporated into the community and more the younger generations, that it's important, like I said, in my own opinion, that we ask the person or the family how they would like to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and kind of following that question, Sarah had kind of asked about, so she said, I'm a white trans woman working in New Mexico, and I was wondering what you think about criticisms about the term Latinx, written or spoken. I have heard suggestions that it is a colonist imposition on language, but I am also sensitive to non-binary identities. Do you have any recommendations on inclusive writing or speech? And I know you covered a little bit about asking families and individuals that people are working with. So how about anything about inclusion in writing and speech?
How do you want to go?
Well, yeah, I don't feel in the position to kind of give an advice in this area. I think, like Teresa said, what is it? What do you feel more comfortable? So the Latinx terminology is new, and I'm starting to like it and use it. I'm old school, I am a Latina, but now I'm using Latinx because that is really, in my view, it is inclusive to all sexual orientation and whatever. So it's the terminology that more and more the new generation is using a lot. If you feel comfortable using that, use whatever you feels comfortable. And I think that's kind of what my humble advice will be.
And then we have a question about DACA recipients. So are DACA recipients undocumented, and do they have driver's licenses?
Yes. So we have a misconception that DACA, they have a status, right? But DACA are undocumented. DACA recipients are undocumented folks that they are here every 2 years. You have to renew your DACA, right? To renew your DACA, you have to pay $495. And we advise that when you do the renewal, do it with an immigration attorney or DOJ representative. Sometimes they have to pay attorneys about $1,000, $1,200 or $500 to renew your DACA. So because you are undocumented, you don't have how can I explain this? So you're undocumented. However, DACA recipients have access to work permit and driver's license. So that's very, very unique. And that's why we wanted to really advocate right now to hopefully reopen DACA for those that are waiting to apply for DACA, because it's huge. I remember, just one quick example. This is a student that I was taking a class, I think in Milwaukee, a DACA recipient, right? So driver's license she had, and then she had a work permit. So she's driving to her class. Suddenly she sees a police car behind her. Immediately she leaves the highway because she's scared, right? Because that's, how she was all these years undocumented. So right away she forgot she had DACA, leaves the highway, and then realizes, oh my God, I have a driver's license. Why am I escaping or doing this? So I really want people to understand that the trauma and then all of that's put into our undocumented people is real. It's really real. The fear is real. Thank you.
And we have a couple other questions coming in. So when ICE shows up to your organization to raid, how do you protect the people you help? Are the lawyers on site and provide immediately help?
So when the ICE raids were here, we were not prepared, right? I remember 11 o'clock, my phone was off the hook, calls like people are being detained. So locally, Teresa talked about the Latino Support Network, LCA, all of that. So immediately we got together, all of us, and said, at Centro Hispano, saying what's happening. Immediately we had to put a plan together. So we had Centro to do a official social media ad. Our immigration attorneys, immediately we connect them with the families whose loved ones were starting to be detained, and then us, being social workers, we connected with the family immediately. I remember having a meeting on a Wednesday night, in a secrecy, because people, it was like a beginning of a war. So we met with the families, we talked, we have the attorneys explain the process and all of that to the families. And then we really try to help in that way. And then we had community members out there that we didn't even know that they were, going to the streets, making sure that families, going to buy some groceries, taking school social workers or other advocates, really trying to help families that they want to leave their homes, with some food and things like that.
Thank you. And then in terms, kind of going off again about your presentation, Fabi, in terms of the undocumented community, we are having a lot of really interesting questions. So one of them is actually about mixed status families. And the question is, what are some of the unique concerns present for US citizen children with undocumented parents?
So here's the thing, if you have your kids and you are undocumented, So if you are detained by ICE, I mean, you can be deported, right? So usually the kids have the right to stay, but are you going to leave your children alone here? And that's another thing, right? So we had cases where, parents were going to be deported and then they wanted to leave their kids, their relatives, and the relatives that were also undocumented were saying, I love these kids, but I cannot take care of them because if I do, maybe ICE is going to come after me. So it is very troublesome. However, that's why in our Immigration Affairs Office, we have a safety plan that we go through with families. If they are afraid of this happening, we have a whole plan like power of attorneys, who are you going to leave your kids, bank accounts, the schools and everything. So it's like, if you a preparedness plan, emergency plan that we always tell people, you have to have a plan, not only for ICE raid. Let's say your house catches on fire and what are your documents? What are you going to do? So I think it is very important for us to advocate for that, talk to the parents about that. Now, children, if they grow up and they, 21 and then have jobs and things like that, they can apply for their parents. But every case is different. It's not a cookie cutter for everybody. Every family is different. So always stay connected with our office or immigration attorneys to keep asking about your options.
And if I might also add that it's not just one officer's responsibility to take care of this issue. When I was working for Child Protective Services for 24, 25 years, a lot of these incidents happen, and Child Protective Services, the social workers were not prepared in many occasions to work with these children. And I think it is important for the system to understand that this is not a one office kind of job, that the system also needs to be ready to serve the undocumented children. For example, I remember working with Jeannie Ferguson on an incident where the mom was killed by the father here. And so the father was incarcerated. He was obviously going to spend the rest of his life there. And we took custody of the children, and the children were legal US citizens, but mom was not in the picture anymore. So we had to really work hard to try to find out what exactly was important for these children in terms of who do we need to work with, like the victim witness program, also work with the consulate, Mexican consulate in Chicago. It's a very complex thing, because I remember that we had to work directly with the consulado, with the Mexican consulate, so that we could actually locate other family members in the country where mom was born. And then we found the grandparents. And then we also had to apply for benefits with the victim witness program, so that the children, if they were going to go, if the grandparents wanted them to go to live in Mexico, so that they will have a way when they were going to grow up to come back also to the United States, because they were US citizens. And so the county was not ready for that, but at least I was there and I was able to find out and collaborate and network with other people that had more knowledge, so that we could set the stage for the county to start thinking about, this is not going to be the first case. So we need to start getting ready to be able to serve children of undocumented people. I ended up taking these children to Mexico because there was no other way to do that. And so many times you have to go out of your way to try to help undocumented children.
So Fabi and Teresa, you guys have done a lot of work in the community and started off a lot of different types of initiatives to support both the Latinx and undocumented community. Are there any stories that resonate or really shine out to you or stand out to you about the work that you've done and why it's important to continue advocating for the undocumented community?
So I told you that I was going to come back to give you a story that is very close to my heart, and Fabi's too, because we worked together in this incident. And so going back to the support network, when I told you about the Latino Children and Families Council, the Latino Health Council was already formed. They were already serving and doing a lot of Latino health fairs to be able to provide people with, checkups and a lot of other prevention and information about resources that the health community had. We then had an incident where in Child Protective Services, where a mom, undocumented mom from Honduras was working, and that day, in a hotel, and that day she was not supposed to go to work. But the employer said, we need you here. We don't have other people to work other than you and your sister. And they, Delmi said, this client said, well, but I don't have anybody to take care of my child. And the employer had such a big need for her to come to work that she pretty much forced her to come to work. And she told her, you can bring your child to work with you in a hotel where there was a swimming pool. And so this child came with his mom to work, and the aunt was working there too. The aunt was working on the second floor. Mom was working on the first floor. And the child who was only 3, almost 4 years old, was going back and forth upstairs, downstairs to see his mom, his aunt. And so both of them knew that one of them kind of was going to take care of the child while they were cleaning the rooms. So both of them believed that the child was with them. And then suddenly both of them connected and said, where is Fernando? And they said, Fernando was with you. No, he was with you. So they went in panic mode and started looking for the child. Sadly, they found the child. He had drowned in the swimming pool. So that just tells you about a lot of prevention and education, not only in the Latino community, but also in the community at large. That day, the hotel forced this woman to bring her child to work. And also, there were a lot of safety measurements that were not taken in place. The woman in the front desk was not looking at the cameras. The thing that connected the door to lock, was not working that day. So when the last person got in there, the door didn't quite latch, and the child was able to open the door with his little hand, got in there and started looking at the water and decided, let me explore in there. And sadly, he had fallen into the swimming pool and he drowned. So I was able to work in that case, and Fabi was also with the county. So we both said, we really need to do more education and more programs to teach people that they have the right to say, no, I'm not going to work. I don't have to work because it's not my day to be there, and I don't have childcare. But also a lot of education about the law and what they were able to hire a lawyer and sue the hotel, even though they were undocumented, because people who are undocumented always think they don't have any rights in this country, even to hire a lawyer to, because, I was working illegally, so I shouldn't be able to do anything. So over 18, maybe 20 years ago, Fabi and I decided, with the support of the Latino Health Council, that we needed to form the Latino Children and Families Council, where we do, ever since we applied for funding, and we do a lot of radio programs and workshops to educate the community on issues related to child abuse or anything related to things like this incident.
Thank you, Teresa. We have tons of stories and examples that we can talk about. you know, especially about after the ICE raid that happened in 2019, they could really suffer a lot of traumas, right? So I remember that a mom called me in tears saying that her 5-year-old was looking at the kids playing from the apartment and in the backyard, and the kids were calling him, hey, come, you know, vamos a jugar, let's play. And he was like, no, I can't. If I go down, the police may come and then will arrest me and my parents. So all that stuff, because when the raids happen, and you know that, and we're not exaggerating, some of the these agents, you know, they will like, I don't know, knock on the wall and the door, and you know, it's, you know, in that very aggressive way, these arrests that happen. So, and then, you know, receiving calls about this woman that I remember, she was doing childcare. And then it was around 4 in the afternoon, and I remember she calling me saying, I think ICE is here. This is like about months later, after the ICE raid. Oh, ICE is here. My, you know, they're gonna come. You know, people are gonna come and pick up their kids. I don't know what to do. This police, you know, this van is there, and it says police, and I don't know what to do. I am in the bathroom, and then you could hear that kids were like kind of, you know, I can just picture that they were in the bathroom and, you know, calling. So I'm like, okay, calm down. I'm gonna call, and that's why we have that rapid response team calling Assistant Patterson, Chief Assistant Patterson, saying, hey, what's going on? I have this mom who's like panicking. And immediately he was able to check that they were doing a drug raid or something like that, just the police in that neighborhood. It wasn't immigration. So for me to call back saying, calm down, it's just the police, they're not gonna do anything to you. So many incidents like this, right? I mean, the trauma stays with you. Now we're talking about asylum seekers. You guys are watching TV. If you do, sometimes I don't, because it's just bad news. So, you know, these families are, I mean, entire families are leaving their countries. For somebody to leave everything behind, you have to really think about, you know, it's the conditions in which they are living back in their home countries is not livable. So I'm gonna risk my life to provide better life for my kids. So we have stories, you know, about this seven-year-old who, I don't know if I already told you that, but 7-year-old waiting out there to get in, and then dad gets a heart attack and dies on the street in front of the 7-year-old. Mom is here in Madison trying to find out what happened to this kid and all of that. I mean, you can imagine the trauma, the anxiety. So after a few months, we find out that kid is in Texas, and then it's going to be reunified with mom. But you know, those horror stories. I mean, we are having these young families coming with young kids and seeing atrocities while they're, you know, and they get inside the United States. I'm talking about asylum seekers, and like I say in my presentation, without work authorization. You know, living expenses, housing here is super expensive. Not having this immigration assistance or legal assistance, all of that is piling up. And then it's really sad, but we are going to see some very sad cases where, you know, we really as a community need to respond. Yeah, it is very important to be aware of that, especially those of us that are working with the immigrant families.
Fabi, I think one other important point in here, I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about that. Both of us and many of us work with victims of crimes, domestic violence and other incidents, you know, sexual, you know, child abuse and stuff like that. And one of the things that has been very important for me, for other people to learn, is that people can apply for a U visa when they're victims of crimes or domestic violence or, you know, incidents that happen in the community. So Fabi, I don't know if you I mean, for me, that has been very helpful to work with families and know that we can help them like that.
No, thanks for, yeah, I skipped that part of my presentation. So, yeah, we have access to U-Visa, BAWA, and all of that for victims of abuse, like you're saying. For example, Dane County Department of Human Services, we can sign the U-Visa certification. But here's the thing, anytime you see an abuse, anytime you see, any type of abuse, it's very important, especially if you're working with the family, to connect. I mean, you can connect with us because the families may be able to apply for this U-Visa. It takes a long time to do this application. However, once, let's say there's a domestic violence in a family, then, mom will apply, and then mom can apply for the children too, right? So it will take a long time, but with this administration, we just learned that while you're waiting, U-Visa holders can get a work permit. How wonderful. That was not there before. So I know, so like the thing is that that's why, there are I love to do the workshops and things like that with immigration attorneys, because they will go in detail about what is considered for somebody to apply for a U-Visa or BAWA. And so really important for us to learn that.
So we do have a couple minutes left. We have 10 minutes. And so I kind of want to get into a couple of questions about advocacy and how to be an ally to the undocumented and documented community. Because as you guys have talked about, there are a lot of barriers and challenges that the undocumented and Latino or Latinx community face. And so what are things that school social workers perhaps can do to support children and families of who are of mixed statuses or are undocumented?
So I was going to also ask you, Cristhabel, to talk a little bit about the Dreamers Center or the Dreamers. I always mixed up the name. Sorry about that. But
okay.
Especially when we talk about it, and that's a resource. So if we want to talk about that.
Yeah. So I work with Dreamers Wisconsin, and so our organization, it's a nonprofit organization, and we really focus on three things: advocacy, educational programming, and scholarships. And so through advocacy, obviously we try to push for working with different people in the community for advocacy in terms of advocating for change for the undocumented and documented community, and educational programming that we offer for our students really focuses on working with high school undocumented, documented students in Wisconsin, providing them with a college readiness program that will allow them to learn about how to navigate and apply to college as an undocumented and documented student. And so students have access to mentors, internships, as well as mental health resources through our program. And one of our big initiatives at the organization Dreamers of Wisconsin, we offer scholarships for our students. So this upcoming week, actually next week, we'll be offering two $10,000 scholarships on that will be awarded to either an undocumented high school or undergraduate or graduate student who is pursuing higher education in Wisconsin. So that's just a little bit about Dreamers of Wisconsin, but I am also the program assistant and social worker at the new Center for Dreamers, which, if you don't already know about, it is a huge resource center for primarily focuses on DACA students, and they provide legal services through the Immigration Justice Clinic here at the law school. And so they have different workshops available that people can sign up for to get a consultation on maybe immigration questions that they may have. And they also offer educational services or career counseling services through our director, who is Erika Rosales. And she is able to, the education system, when it comes to navigating that as an undocumented, documented student, it's very complex here in Wisconsin. And so there are a lot of questions about professional licensures and like what can students do after they graduate if they don't have a DACA, for example, to work in. And so Erica is able to help facilitate questions like that. But then we also have through the Center for Dreamers, through the program that I'm working on and the social work aspect is creating, for example, a state resource guide that addresses food insecurity and where undocumented and documented individuals can access services in the different counties in Wisconsin, as well as doing referrals for different mental health services. So that's just a little bit about the Center for Dreamers, and then Dreamers of Wisconsin, which really focus on supporting our undocumented and documented students in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. So it is very important that, I mean, I don't know who is out there. You can see us, we cannot see you, but you know, we need you. We need every single, I say we, talking on behalf of our undocumented immigrant population, we need, you need to help us advocate for policies that uphold dignity, stability, and safety for our immigrant communities. You know, attend rallies. Sometimes you're going to hear, you know, we're going to do a rally because, you know, we want DACA, you know, path to citizenship, you know, attend with us. As I say, Voces de la Frontera is very an organization that's really out there. We need help, you know, writing to your elected officials, right? Make phone calls on behalf. When we wanted you to testify in hearings, you know, writing letters to newspapers, to the editors, you know, they're going to listen to you more than us, maybe. You know, just like, you know, get involved, join us. And really, I think what it takes a village to make a change, and just stay connected with us. And I think that's kind of some of the things that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, and
So yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say, you know, I think it is extremely important for you to understand that, you know, you can always reach out to any of us. The thing that has been very helpful, like I told you during the pandemic, is that we're such a well-organized community. We are all professionals, are connected. We're able to refer people to Unidos, to Fabi, to other organizations, because we know each other, because we don't only see each other once a year, but we try to stay connected to make changes. We connect with the schools. I think I saw a question in there about how do we connect with the schools. We're very connected to schools. We have a Latino Education Council where we're always looking for, you know, to support anything that's happening in the Madison Metropolitan School District. Right now, we just wrote a letter to the superintendent as a support group to try to make sure that some of the things we want for our Latino youth are happening at that level when they have board meetings. So, you know, just come to the Latino Support Network, connect with Fabi, connect with myself, get to know your resources, who is actually out there providing services for a community that you more likely at some point as a social worker or a service provider will be working with an undocumented or a Latino person. So you might as well, if you haven't, to start learning more about the Dane County or the state community. I say Dane County because we are so lucky to live in Dane County and have so many resources and be so organized.
Yeah, and I think adding on to kind of what Fabi and Teresa have already kind of covered, it's a collaborative effort of advocates and allies and all people who are in different organizations working together to really create the systemic and institutional changes that we want to see to support our undocumented community. I'm gonna see, I think we have about 2 more minutes for questions. So I guess, what are some organizations, you guys kind of already mentioned a couple, like Voces de la Frontera and the Dane County Immigrations Affairs Office as a resource. Are there any other organizations that people should be aware of?
Sure.
stay connected?
I think we're gonna probably share our presentation, but Dane Sanctuary Coalition is another organization, Open Doors to Refugees, big organization helping. So we are gonna probably put this PowerPoint to be shared, and then you can find some resources. And as you mentioned, anytime, call us, email us, and if we don't know the answer right away, we're gonna find it for you.
And we also have Centro Hispano. So, Centro Hispano is very active. We are very well connected, and they can always, you can always go there and find what you need. And if they don't have something, they will probably refer you to other organizations.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is our time for today. It is 3:30 now, so we do have to close out this presentation. Fabi and Teresa, thank you so much for all of your hard work in putting this presentation together and taking the time to educate our social workers across the state about how to support not only the Latino community, but also the undocumented community. And I know there's so much more to cover, and I wish we had more time. But as you guys heard, Teresa and Fabi are open to having even more dialogue and taking in questions. So please feel free to stay connected with them through, I don't know if you guys are, at the end of the presentation, we'll have our contact information for either three of us who want to learn more about how to support the undocumented community. So again, thank you so much. And I will hand it over to Alice.
Well, thank you. Thank you to all three of you. And Cristhabel, you did a wonderful job coordinating that and facilitating. And I agree, I wish we had way more time. And it makes me think that the school should host sort of an all-day kind of training done because I think there's the interest based on how many people were here today and all the questions that we didn't get to. So thank you for the questions that folks asked. We tried, or I know they tried to get to as many questions as they could, but it seems as though there's just a lot of community interest, and so we will be following up. If you go into the Q&A and just respond to somebody's question in writing with your contact information, then it'll show up for everyone. I think that might be a good way to share that as I finish us up here. But anyway, we want to thank everybody so much for attending today. And thanks to our presenters for sharing their time and expertise with us. You started out saying you weren't experts, but you certainly are experts in this field. Thank you for everyone's attendance and for your commitments and efforts to confront racial injustice. We do have an evaluation, which is in the Q&A section, and you'll also be receiving an email later today with a link to complete the evaluation. It sounds like our presenters are willing to share, and so we will send those slides to you, to attendees of this workshop as well. We'll send the slides once we receive them. For those of you who requested CEUs when you registered, you will also receive that in your email. So if you are wanting to or planning to attend next Friday, we have another great lineup next Friday, and we hope to see you then. Please make sure you go to our conference website and register, because the registrations for each day were separate. So again, just a huge thank you to our speakers. And I know I learned a lot today, and I'm sure our audience did too. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.